Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to Slovenia once again, and that of course means that we're going to take a look at yet another beer from the Davor box. So a massive shout out and thank you to Davor Širitz, who has been a long-term subscriber to and supporter of the channel. It's thanks to him that you see all of these Slovenian beers in it, because otherwise, you know, I would not be able to get a hold of these at all. He's got a massive knowledge of the local Slovenian stuff, and he's a huge fan of Belgian beers as well, actually. So some of the Belgian beers that you've seen on the channel have been thanks to him too. He has a ridiculous cellar actually that I'm very jealous of. But yeah, great guy. I met him in Munich a couple of years ago, and hopefully you can see him on the channel again at some point soon. He was on one of the recent live streams with myself and Thomas from Thomas Open in the Netherlands, and yeah, we had a really nice chat actually. It'd be awesome to have him on more of the live streams, but I'm sure when we make it down to Slovenia, fingers crossed sometime in 2021, COVID permitting, I'm sure Davor will feature in some of the out and about videos that we'll film down there, and it'll be really cool to film a few beer tastings with Davor, because like I say, he's a very knowledgeable guy. But a huge thank you to him, my Slovenian beer mule, for making this kind of Slovenian mini-series possible. Actually, it's really cool to be able to review these beers, and I've been very impressed with the standards of the Slovenian beers as well, actually. So yeah, pretty damn cool, I have to say. So for this one, we are actually going to return to the very first Slovenian brewery that I ever tried anything from. So we're going to go to Ajdovščina, which is in the southwest of the country, and we're having a look at my third beer from Pivovarna Pelicon. So this one is simply called Coffee Stout. It comes in at 8% ABV, which makes it an Imperial coffee stout, one of the lower alcohol Imperial stouts that you're going to find. I think 8% probably is the border, and this one apparently is brewed with Honduran coffee beans from one of the local roasteries down there. So yeah, this should be pretty cool. As I've told you before, I'm a massive fan of coffee stouts. I think that coffee beans are one of the most interesting adjuncts that you can actually put in beer, because depending on where they're grown, you know, that can really affect the flavour, because you know, you've got different soil types. If you grow them at different altitudes, they'll give you lots of different flavours as well. So yeah, definitely a very interesting adjunct to put in. My whole thing with coffee stouts started because of Dugas Brewery in Gothenburg doing a few beers, and it's just something that's kind of grown from there actually. This will also be my very first Slovenian coffee stout as well actually, which makes it exciting. It's also my first beer from the dark end of the spectrum from Pelicon as well. The other two beers that I had from these guys, the first one was the Third Pill, which I found in Edinburgh. That was an IPA. That was how Davor discovered the channel actually, and then in one of the Davor boxes, either 2 or 3, I forget, I reviewed the Quantum, which is their double IPA, but they do have a triple IPA these days, and I think they've got a couple of lagers and things like that as well. So probably the next review that you see will be one of the lagers, or it will be the triple IPA. We'll just need to see what we can get a hold of, but Davor told me that for the moment this is the one that I should be reviewing, so we'll take his word on that. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Pivovarna Pelicon before, and I'm in no doubt that you will see some at some point in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Slovenian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to very regularly over the next little while, thanks to Davor again. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Pivovarna Pelicon then, on to my brewery notes. So Pivovarna Pelicon, as I've told you already, are from Ajdovščina, which is a small town of around 6,700 people in the Vipava Valley in Slovenia. It's in the southwest of the country. It's kind of almost halfway between Ljubljana, which is right in the centre of Slovenia, and I guess you could say Koper and Trieste. It's a little bit east of Trieste, over the border in Italy. It's about 20 kilometres in total from the from the Italian border actually. But the brewery itself was founded by Mattei Pelicon and Anita Lozar back in 2013, and apparently Mattei set up the brewery using Kickstarter and was the first, and his was the first brewery in Europe to do this actually. Unfortunately the brewery don't do tours apart from in December, but you can go to a local store called Falador and they'll arrange a beer tasting with you there if you contact the brewery. But these guys also host their own little beer market in front of the brewery from October until about Christmas time, and yeah, that's probably your safest bet to get a hold of some of these beers. But over the last few years they've continued to grow steadily, and the brewery can now produce up to 250,000 litres as of 2020, but in 2019 they produced around 200,000 litres, with most of their beer being sold in Slovenia and Italy, but also some apparently making it to Denmark and Croatia. But they also have a sort of partnership with Bratinov Gin as well, and they've produced a tonic with them called Hoppy Collins. And as of September 2020, when I'm producing this review for you, these guys have produced around 20 different beers in total actually. So yeah, I'm not sure how that number of beers has differed over the years. My first encounter with these guys must have been back in like 2015, I think, maybe 2014 or 2015, something like that actually. So these guys, I first reviewed their beers a good few years ago. The second review must have been in around 2017 or something like that actually, the Quantum. So yeah, there's been a few years between each review that I've done from these guys, but as I say, I've been impressed with the beers that I've tried from them. I would recommend that you try the third pill. The Quantum was quite nice as well, and I do hope that we can review a few more beers from these guys at some point in the future as well. I think it's definitely fair to say that these guys are one of the older and kind of more established craft beer names in Estonia at the moment actually, but there's lots of very good breweries there. There must be about 40 or 50 different breweries in Slovenia actually at the moment, which is pretty impressive. It's a country of only like 1.2 million people or so, or is it 2 million? I forget if it's 1.2 or 2.1 million down in Slovenia, but yeah, quite a small country. I'm pretty sure it is only about 2 million people that are in Slovenia actually, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, they've got a great brewing heritage down there, and I've been impressed with the beers that I've had from them so far. And the breweries are spread out all across the country. You've got things in Maribor, you've got things in Koper, you've got quite a bit of stuff around Ljubljana of course as well, and things in the Savinja Valley. There's a lot of great beer from Slovenia, and they've got a lot of their own hop varieties as well actually, which are very interesting. Green Gold Brewing in fact, they're basically the brewery of a hop farm, which is pretty cool. Luka Reinik actually, he's got some really interesting hops down there. But yeah, like I say, definitely nice to return to Pelicon after quite some time, and my first beer from the dark end of the spectrum too, so yeah, equally interesting. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Pelicon for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. So I'd just like to have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, it is quite similar to the beers we've had from these guys before. They tend to have, you know, very plain labels, to be honest with you. The other ones that I had, I think the Quantum had a black label like this, but I'm sure the third pill had a white backed label. I'm not sure. But yeah, plain silver bottle cap on this one. It does tell you a few things about the beer on the side, but I think that's just talking about ingredients and stuff. I'm not going to try and speak Slovenian to you, because that would just go very, very badly actually. But yeah, this one is a half-litre bottle, and that's a bit of a beast actually. You would think that they would sell this beer in a 330. They maybe do, in fairness, but maybe this is just the one that Davor was able to get, but still. Yeah, should be a very, very nice beer actually. But yeah, this one was brewed with Marsala, not sure how to pronounce that, with Marsala Honduras coffee beans from the Escobar Roastery in Vernica down in Slovenia, like I said. So yeah, should be pretty cool actually. I think I've had one beer that's had Honduran coffee beans in it as well actually, but you know, I don't know too much about the different varieties of coffee individually, but you know, the thing with coffee beans is that you know, wherever you grow them, you've got different soil types, so that affects the flavour. If you grow them at different altitudes, they call it MASL, M-A-S-L, meters above sea level, that can also affect them. Apparently the most fruity and sweet coffees and things like that come from places that are above 2,000 meters above sea level. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, I have to say. So yeah, Honduran coffee I don't know too much about, but you know, like I say, these are one of the coffee beans are one of the most complex adjuncts that you can add into a beer, so they always make them very, very interesting. But yeah, as you can see, this one, simply called Coffee Stout, 8% ABV, and it pours pretty much exactly as you would expect. So if we shine the light through this one, there's pretty much no light getting through that. Even at the top, you don't even get a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to it. You can see that the beer poured with somewhere between a half and 2/3 of a frothy, that's quite a dark tan head on this one, incidentally. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but the head is just fading away to be quite a thin foamy layer just now, but nothing wrong with that, I have to say. So yeah, in terms of a coffee stout, nothing surprising about this one. A lovely dark ebony kind of rosewoody colour, black as night pretty much, no light coming through that at all. So yeah, let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one then and just see how we get on. I have to say I'm very, very curious about this beer because Davor did say it was good and he knows his stuff. Oh yeah, that's pretty damn nice, I have to say. This coffee, the coffee that's in this one comes across as very, very sweet actually and very fruity. Does this have a bottle date on it? I think it doesn't say. It says best before February of 2021. I'm guessing then that this beer probably it's been in the bottle for either a year and what would it be, a year and maybe about 6 months or so, or it's been in the bottle about 6 months. I'm not sure how long they would put in this because at 8% this probably could last. Could probably last about maybe 2-3 years in the bottle and still be okay, but you know, you need to be about 10% to make them last for kind of 10 years and things like that. I'm not sure. This beer I suspect will be either about 6 months old in the bottle or maybe about a year and 6 months, because the thing was, Davor did say that this beer was a little bit more difficult to get, so not sure. But yeah, it comes across beautifully actually, but it has a wee bit of sharpness to it. It does have a little bit of sharpness to it. So sometimes you have to watch for that with beers. Sometimes they can be a touch oxidised, but I get the impression that it's probably just the coffee in this. Some of these coffee stouts, it can be both, it can be the hops as well that will give you this, but you get a hell of a lot of fruitiness from different coffee beans. So I mean, with this one, the coffee beans come across as really aromatic. They come across as very, very aromatic, definitely, but there's a lot of fruitiness to them as well. And it's interesting that I don't know what kind of altitudes you get in Honduras actually. The highest place in South America, I guess this would be Central America, Latin America I guess we should say. The highest place down there is Ecuador, if I remember rightly. Yeah. The aroma coming out of this is lovely. We'll just talk about the coffee beans for a moment. So the coffee beans for me, they come across as, they've got a nice smooth roast to them, but you've got a lovely big aromatic quality coming out of them. They're very floral in that sense, but you get quite a bit of sharpness out of the fruits. So it's quite, you know, sort of black curranty and raisiny almost in its the fruity qualities, and that is just the coffee beans in there. So nice and smooth on the roasty side of things, a wee tiny bit of earthiness to them, but a big aromatic note and some really sharp fruits for me. And those are forming the backbone of this beer. We've not even talked about the malts or the hops or anything like that yet. That is just the coffee beans that I'm talking about there. So for me, on the malty side of things, you get a nice little bit of brown bread out of this one for sure. I love it. You know, it's kind of like almost a bit like a kind of German rye bread in honesty. So I really like that about this one. I like a bit of a bready backbone, but there's a good bit of chocolate in here as well. You know, maybe about a sort of 80% cocoa chocolate, I would say. Quite a dark, high cocoa percentage chocolate in here. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this one. The aroma that comes out of this beer, as I said, is very, very nice. So yeah, lovely, lovely smelling beer, this one. The There's a little bit of brown sugar for me. There's a wee bit of a well-fired kind of toasty caramel in there, but I think the malt base, it's really more brown bready. A little bit, there is a wee bit of that toasty brown sugar in the middle of the nose, like I say, but there is a bit of that kind of darker high cocoa chocolate. You'll get a few nutty elements to the beer as well, a little bit of woodiness further forward on the nose. So yeah, a lot of things that you would expect from a coffee stout for sure. But it comes across as a very nice beer actually. I like how this one goes together. In terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, what would I say? Yeah, nice little bit. It's quite a smooth earthiness that comes out of this one. I'd be curious to know whether they are using Slovenian hops. There's something that tells me with this one, that with the way that the grassy and floral notes come out, there is something that tells me it could be just, you know, like Styrian Goldings or Dana or something like that that they're using in this. One of the lower alpha acid Slovenian hops. Of course, you've got very high ones like, you know, you've got the Dragon, the Wolf, a few other ones there as well. So I'd be curious to know whether it is Slovenian hops they've used in this, because it's definitely got a little bit of that nobly kind of smoothness to it. The choice for hops usually that you would use in coffee stouts, probably it would be like Northern Brewer from Germany, or maybe, you know, Bramling's Cross from England, but it doesn't strike me as any of those. I don't know if there's a sort of Slovenian equivalent actually. I really would be interested to know that. Is there a Slovenian hop that's particularly good for use in stouts, that gives you these kind of fruity qualities that you would get from, say, you know, Eureka is probably the American one that's very good. Williamette as well is another good one for stouts and giving you a lot of red fruit. Or, you know, as I say, Bramling's Cross from Germany. Sorry, Bramling's Cross from England, Northern Brewer from Germany. Yeah, there's something that's quite noble about these hops, and the grassy side of the Slovenian hops is quite noble in the same way that Czech hops are and German hops are. So yeah, you've got a nice little bit of grassiness coming out of this one, just a wee tiny touch of floral quality. I would say that the floral notes are quite smooth, but there's a good bit of kind of earthiness to this one as well, which builds a good bridge with the kind of coffee beans in this beer. But on the fruity side of things, some of the fruit comes from the coffee beans, like I said, but you are getting a little bit of a hoppy, fruity character to this one as well. So you can definitely smell a bit of a kind of juicy, kind of plummy and figgy type note to the beer. There is a little bit of that sharper blackcurranty, blackberry kind of note coming out of it too, but you also have a little bit of a kind of very sharp raisiny quality to this beer too. So I would definitely recommend that you take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it. But yeah, I like how it goes together in this one. Very nice smelling beer, I have to say. So thumbs up to Pivovarna Pelicon for this. Let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. So this one is simply called Coffee Stout. A coffee stout coming in at 8% ABV, brewed with Marsala Honduras coffee beans from the Escobar Roastery in Mrnička. Let's get stuck in. Very curious about this, and thank you to Davor once again. Slanja, skål, na zdravje. Oh yeah, that's really nice actually. The thing you're going to notice about this beer is that it comes across, it actually feels very light in the mouthfeel. And you're just kind of like, alright, where are the coffee beans? But then they really come out in the aftertaste. That is one of the things with this beer. This is one that's a sipper, and it just wants you to sit there and enjoy the aftertaste, 100%. The way that this one develops is really very nice actually. So it's a very light, very clean feeling stout in my mind, but it's got a lovely aftertaste to it. I like beers that do that. You take them in and you're like, wait, and then, you know, it gives you a lot of stuff. That's definitely what this one does. So yeah, lovely, kind of very clean feeling, but nice. But very nice and kind of smooth stout at the same time. Yeah, definitely not a thick and creamy stout in my mind. It's a very smooth, it's definitely quite a clean and smooth one, I have to say. I honestly can't remember what the mouthfeel was like on the other beers that they had, but you know, Slovenia is a kind of quite mountainous country, so it kind of makes sense that they would have kind of clean water. But the thing I always noticed about the Slovenian beers was that they were quite oily in a lot of ways. I don't find this beer overly oily, to be honest with you, and I'm trying to think of other dark beers that I've had from them in the past. So yeah, it's difficult to think actually, because this, as I say, this is the first coffee stout, so I've got no Slovenian point of reference. But yeah, compared to other coffee stouts, I would say that this one, it feels a little bit lighter in the mouthfeel, but then again it is only 8% compared to, you know, the big 10, 12% ones that I've had from other breweries. So that's another point to remember about this actually. But yeah, this is solid. Let's try and break down the flavour of this one then and just see how we get on. What I'll say is the coffee beans really form the backbone of this beer. So the coffee actually comes across, it is a bit more roasty in the flavour than it is in the aroma. So if you go towards the thing that blankets the middle of your tongue, the middle third and the back third of your tongue in this is the coffee bean. So if you move further back, you definitely have you can feel the more roasty elements of the coffee, and I suspect that that's probably a bit of the black malt that will be in the beer as well. But yeah, if you move to almost the border between the middle third and the back third of your tongue, you've got a nice kind of roasty, toasty quality to it. I do suspect that there's a bit of carafa in this, I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah, you can feel the coffee beans there. There's quite a bit of a woody quality to this beer too. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then move diagonally back, you get some nice woodiness there, and if you go to the very centre of your palate and then just move forward, you can feel a little nutty element in there as well, and that kind of spreads forward underneath the front third of your palate as well. But yeah, the back third of your palate is definitely where you get the more kind of roasty and earthy elements to the coffee coming out of the beer. So it's the drier side of the coffee, I think, that forms the backbone of this beer. On top of that layer though, that's when you get a bit of the breadiness. There is a wee bit of an almost kind of like German rye bread sort of thing just sitting on top of that, to be honest. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together is really nice actually. In terms of the, how do you say, in terms of the the middle of your palate though, the middle third, the biggest complexity to this beer is in the kind of middle third of your tongue. So if you go towards the back third of your tongue, you can feel the sort of bready elements of the beer are a little bit thicker. You get a few more kind of grainy notes out of it. That's where the kind of almost rye bready flavours just stick up a little bit more. Wee bit of a roasty, toasty, grainy type quality to it as well. But as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, that's where you get a bit more complexity to this one. So like I say, nice little bit of bready base to it. Sitting on top of the breadiness there, you do get some of the chocolate. So for me, it's quite maybe about an 80% cocoa chocolate that you get out of this one. There is a wee element in the middle of the palate. You've got a nice little bit of a kind of woody. You do have a nice little bit of a kind of more milky, chocolatey quality to it. Sitting in the very centre of the palate, that's when you get the kind of caramelly notes out of the beer. It does have a wee bit of a sweet caramel, but as you move further out towards the further towards the edges of that one, you get a nice little bit of you definitely get a nice little bit of a more yeah, you definitely get more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit kind of thing coming out of this. There is definitely a bit more of a biscuity quality to the sweetness in this beer. So yeah, there's a good level of complexity in this one. The coffee, I would say, on the aromatic side of things, you do get a wee bit of that out of the you can feel it. The further you go into the aftertaste, the middle of your palate obviously develops a bit more, and you get more of the kind of floral aromatic-y notes out of the beer. But otherwise, it's quite it is quite an earthy type coffee, and more a smooth roast kind of thing there as well. But some of the fruitiness, you do get some of the kind of fruity notes pushing their way out as well, and you can feel those just towards the kind of the front part of the middle third of your tongue. So that's an interesting point to make about this beer in that sense. So the coffee is a lot more roasty and smooth, I think, than it comes across in the aroma. It's I wasn't expecting that from it, I have to say, but the coffee has a lovely smoothness to it in my mind. So on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you do have a little bit of earthiness out of this one, and it is quite smooth again, which makes me wonder, is it Slovenian hops that are in here? But as you move kind of further forward along the sides of the palate, you can feel it does develop a little bit of a floral quality. You get a wee touch of a floral aromaticity on the front corners of the palate, and as you go round the very front edge of the tongue, it's got a very nice kind of lighter, grassy sort of thing going on. The fruitiness in this beer comes out in on that front third of your tongue, and that's where you get the nice oily bubble that brings out all the fruity esters. So yeah, let's have a look at this then. Let's look at the fruity side of it. So yeah, when you take this beer in, you do get a nice, little bit of. It's quite wet and juicy on the fruity side of the beer actually. So when you reach that border between the kind of middle third of your palate and the front third, you do get this kind of you do get just like a kind of line of like it's almost like a well-fired. The well-fired side of a chocolate cake, you know, or a chocolate brownie, something like that. There is a bit of that roasty kind of dryness there behind the front third of your tongue, which is quite nice. But then in front of that, that's where you get the kind of the juicy qualities out of the beer. So in front of that, you do get a little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness. Then as you move further forward, you get a kind of juicy plum, slightly figgy aroma, and as you flavour, sorry. And as you reach the very kind of front edge of that front third of your tongue, that's where you get the more oily element to the beer. So you get a little bit of a kind of blackcurranty, blackberry-ish type quality out of it, which is quite nice. I like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, it's quite. There's a good level of complexity to this beer, and as I said earlier, the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, the more you get. It does actually grow in terms of aromaticity. You really feel the aromatic qualities of this coffee, the more floral elements of it pushing out, and then the malty side of the beer gets a little bit more bready and almost a touch more woody as well, and then some of the fruity notes push out of the coffee as well. So it's really interesting. The coffee beans are the things that really, into the aftertaste, really push their way out of this one, but the beer elements, I think, they are quite nice in this too. You get the oiliness from the fruits, I think, works quite well with the coffee, and the smoothness of the hops. I'm really guessing there's Slovenian hops in this, because there's a lot of noble type qualities to the hoppy side of this beer too. But I like this one for an 8%er. Like I said, it's one of the lower ABV Imperial Stouts that you're going to come across. That's probably the very edge of what you could call an Imperial Stout, to be honest with you. Some might argue for 7.5%. I would agree with 7.5% for an IPA, but with a dark beer, I think it's just almost custom, if you like, to expect it to be a bit higher. So yeah, 8% for me is when you can start to call it an Imperial Stout. So this is the kind of bottom end of the Imperial Stout booziness, if you like. So for an 8%er, this one does have an impressive level of complexity to it. So you have to say thumbs up to Pelicon for that. And I've enjoyed this one. I have enjoyed this actually. So mouthfeel, this is where this one's quite interesting. So I would say that this is it's definitely one of the lighter kind of coffee stouts that I had. This is the sort of mouthfeel that you would expect from a single stout, to be honest with you. It is quite light in that. I don't know if that is partially due to the water, because these guys in that area will have, it's in a valley, the Vipava Valley, I think their water, if it's mountain water, it will feel very clean. So this beer probably is a little bit lighter in its mouthfeel than you might expect, and it is more wet, I think, compared to the other Slovenian beers that I remember having. But as I said, I've got no reference to another Slovenian coffee stout, so I can't comment there. But yeah, this is one of the lighter coffee stouts I've come across. I would describe this beer as, pretty much mid-bodied, maybe even at the bottom of the mid-bodied part of the scale. But yeah, the carbonation is quite smooth in this one. It feels very, very clean. The beer does have a good little bit of smoothness to it as well. On the hoppy side of things, in terms of bitterness, I think this one's about a 60 IBU beer. The bitterness that you get with this one is quite smooth. It's not overly dry, so it could be a little bit more, but I think about 60, maybe 70 IBUs at a push. Some of that from the coffee beans, some of it from the malt, and some of it from the hops as well. But the malt base, like I said, very, very smooth. Little touch of sweetness to it, but mainly kind of smooth. And this beer does get a bit drier the further you go into the aftertaste. There's a wee touch of sweetness in there, as I said. and there's quite a bit of a kind of juicy, slightly wetter, fruity quality coming out of this beer. But I mean, overall, this is quite an interesting one for me. For an 8%er, it does have a good level of complexity to it. So you have to say thumbs up to Pelicon for that. They've pulled off a really, really solid coffee stout for me on this one. So yeah, definitely cool to have this. It's my first beer from the dark end of the spectrum from these guys, and nice to have them on the channel again after quite a long time. So hopefully next time we can do their triple IPA, or we can do their one of the lagers or something like that. But yeah, definitely an interesting beer, this one. I think they've got a black IPA as well, if I remember rightly. I'd love to have a go at their black IPA, because you don't see too many of those these days either. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the coffee stout, an 8% Imperial coffee stout from Pivovarna Pelicon in Ajdovščina in the Vipava Valley in Slovenia. A really, really nice beer, this one, in my mind, and a hell of a lot of complexity for an 8%er. So yeah, awesome. Once again, a huge thank you to Davor for making this review possible. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Pivovarna Pelicon as well. I'm sure we'll return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. But do check out my Slovenian playlist. There's some great beers down there, and as I say, you will see more of these appearing over the next little while. Check out my social media, check out Pivovarna Pelicon. Massive thank you to Davor once again, but let's leave it at that. Slanja, skål, na zdravje. This was a really, really interesting one for me to review. Cheers.